Well, we're only a quarter of an hour away from those guardians of the consumer when Esther Ranson and her disciples assemble for That's Life. Before that, on BBC One, here's Jan Leeming with the news. It's just after 9:31.
Tony Benn wins the Labour nomination in Chesterfield, an outright winner after 3 ballots. Blizzards bring havoc to a northern motorway. 2 people are killed. Prince Edward has glandular fever, but he's on the mend. Tony Benn was chosen tonight as Labour's candidate in the forthcoming Chesterfield by-election. He beat 5 rivals after a 4.5-hour selection meeting of local party members. The former minister said he felt very proud. The present Chesterfield MP, Eric Varley, is expected to resign his seat tomorrow, and the by-election will be held in about 2 months' time. Our political correspondent David Davis reports.
Mr Benn's quest to convince Chesterfield Labour Party he should be their candidate began when he slipped through the back door of NUM headquarters. Through the front door went the 120 delegates who were to decide his immediate political future. And the other 5 candidates, including the former MP Philip Whitehead, arrived, knowing Mr Benn was the man to beat. The meeting lasted more than 4 hours in an upstairs council chamber. In a side room, Mr Benn and those seeking to deprive him of the nomination waited patiently, even if the tension was obvious. And for an hour before the result was known, newsmen and onlookers waited impatiently in the snow outside. Then, just before 7:15, the victorious candidate emerged. He'd won on the 3rd ballot, with Mr Whitehead his nearest challenger. At a news conference, Labour's prospective candidate said he didn't believe his victory tonight would make the party's task in the by-election more difficult.
Well, I've fought and won 12 parliamentary elections. I totted it up. 329,000 people have voted for a Labour candidate called Benn. My seat was abolished, and I fought a Conservative seat last May. And in that constituency, we held the Labour vote better than any other, better than the party nationally, and we kept the Liberal vote from growing at all. It was absolutely held, and the Labour vote nearly held, so that I don't think there's any personal element in that at all. I think you're going to find that if we do get, as I believe we can and will, a good result in Chesterfield, this is going to lead to a change or serious pressure for a change in the Conservative government, and that will be the first gain. Later we shall have Neil Kinnock at number 10, and that's what we're working for. But in the short run, a good Labour result in Chesterfield will be a very important thing. It'll be studied all over the place. I dare say they'll wake up President Reagan and tell him.
And so, 7 months after Mr Benn was rejected by voters in Bristol, he has successfully surmounted the first hurdle on the way back to Westminster. His victory won't have come as a surprise to Labour's new leadership. In recent days, they'd come to expect it. But now the by-election in early March will be seen as a test of leadership, well as a test of Mr Benn. But tonight, inside Chesterfield Labour Club, those tests were for the future. It was time for congratulation and celebration.
Blizzards have brought chaos to northern areas, especially on the roads. The snow is dying away in most places tonight, but high winds are expected to return tomorrow. Some of the worst conditions have been in Cumbria, where 3 climbers were killed last night when they fell 300 feet on Helvellyn. Today, 2 people were killed on the M6 at Shap in a multi-vehicle pile-up.
The northbound carriageway of the M6 was closed for 3 hours by the accident. It happened near the summit of Shap Fell, an area notoriously prone to the worst effects of the weather. Today it was drifting snow, several feet deep on the hard shoulder. The gale force winds swept the snow right across the motorway. In all, 15 vehicles were involved in the crash, including 2 articulated lorries and 2 coaches. The passengers wait for relief arrived. Police haven't yet revealed the names of the 2 people killed, but 5 people require treatment in hospital and none is seriously hurt. In view of the weather of the past week, rescue services at first anticipated many more casualties. 15 miles away, conditions have remained appalling on the Helvellyn range of fells, where 3 climbers from Teesside died in a 300-foot fall. One of the party of 6 lost his footing and brought down the rest. Another group of climbers raised the alarm.
We found various people and attended them with first aid as best we could and whistled for help. Some were unconscious, head injuries. Been wearing helmets, it'd been a lot less worse. Broken leg, things like that.
Anybody going onto the fells, winter conditions, should obviously have winter equipment. There was no ropes in the fells, although we did find ropes in the sacks, etc. Here to go out and rescue people, not to criticise anybody, look to people who are themselves.
Despite the tragedy and ominous local weather forecasts, some climbers were undeterred today. Many mountain rescue leaders are loath to curb people's enjoyment or criticise their preparations. But after discussions with police, warnings have now been issued for the inexperienced to stay well away from Lake District peaks in this sort of weather.
Main roads have been blocked throughout Scotland by heavy snowfalls and freezing temperatures. Drifts of up to 8 feet closed the A74, the main western route between Scotland and England, but the East Coast Road, the A1, is now open again. More snow is forecast for the north of Scotland. The Queen's youngest son, Prince Edward, is suffering from glandular fever. The 19-year-old prince is well on the way to recovery, but his return to university next week may be delayed.
The prince fell about a week ago while on holiday at Sandringham. He's a first-year student at Cambridge and is suffering with it's particularly common among young people. Glandular fever varies considerably in its severity. Running a high temperature, losing weight and feeling very tired are usual problems. However, Prince Edward's a fit young man, turning out regularly for the Jesus College Second 15, and over the new year he was out shooting. The news of his illness came out because, for the second week running, he missed morning service at Sandringham Church, where, this morning, the American evangelist, Dr. Billy Graham, who's a guest of the Queen at Sandringham, preached the sermon.
The tiny parish church at Sandringham, an unlikely setting for Dr. Billy Graham's return to Britain. Inside the church, the evangelist preached to just 130 people. Outside in the park were another 1,800, only a fraction of the crowd expected. As usual at Sandringham, cameras weren't allowed near the Queen. Dr. Graham's address appealed to the crowd. It was powerful and optimistic.
No, I do not believe that we're going to destroy ourselves in an atomic war. The Bible has other plans for the human race. And it's outlined so clearly in Scripture that we miss it many times.
What did it mean to Billy Graham to preach to the royal family at Sandringham?
Well, it means the same as preaching anywhere in the world, because wherever I go, I preach the gospel of the kingdom of God, and I always have to preach in front of the King of Kings and Lord of Lords.
Mrs. Thatcher has defended her role in trying to secure a £300 million contract for the cementation company while her son Mark was connected with the firm. Today's Observer says the Prime Minister's son was working in the interests of the firm when Mrs. Thatcher was visiting Oman and attempting to win the contract. On ITV's Weekend World, she said she was pleased she could win jobs for Britain.
I have one role when I'm trying to secure contracts for Britain. It is to try to get the business for British companies and not for overseas companies. I bat for Britain. I don't distinguish between British companies. I can't. My concern is that where there is business, that the heads of government decide the country to which the business shall go and the company to which business shall go, shall know that our government here backs its own companies. I don't distinguish between them. I never have.
This evening, Mrs. Thatcher welcomed the US Secretary of State, George Shultz, to talks at Number 10. He's on his way to the Stockholm Disarmament Conference, where he'll meet the Soviet Foreign Minister, Mr. Gromyko, later this week. Earlier, Mr. Shultz had been briefed by Sir Geoffrey Howe on his recent visit to the Middle East. And off Beirut, the USS New Jersey, the world's only operational battleship, opened fire on artillery positions in the hills east of Beirut. The New Jersey started shelling to protect American Marines at the international airport, who came under fire from Druze militia. A fuel dump was set on fire by the Druze, and the airport was closed at the time. America's dilemma over Lebanon is expected to be one of the big issues in a major on in New Hampshire tonight. It features the 8 Democratic contenders for the presidential election, and as Martin Bell reports, they're convinced they can fight the Reagan administration on its nuclear arms policy too.
It was the first time that all 8 candidates had appeared together at all. The apparent front-runner, former Vice President Fritz Mondale, was challenged on the Conservative side by Senator Fritz Hollings of South Carolina, former Governor Reuben Askew of Florida, and Senator John Glenn of Ohio. On the Liberal side, by George McGovern making his 3rd run at the presidency, by Senator Gary Hart of Colorado, Senator Alan Cranston of California, and the latecomer Jesse Jackson. It was a freewheeling form of debate with no ground rules and the candidates free to make what points they could.
If I am elected on January 20th, 1985, the day I take the oath of office, I will announce that the United States will not test or deploy any more nuclear weapons as long as the Soviets do not.
I was the first to come out for a freeze. Nuclear control is the issue of our time. There's none that compares with it.
Someone said none. A group of academics can agree that we must freeze weapons that's going to destroy all of us. But leadership must take the risk for peace and make a difference. If you meet with Andropov, if you talk, you act. If you act, you change things.
The debate still has an hour and a half to run. The contenders so far have been vying for position as their party's most plausible peace candidate.
Snow White and the 7 Dwarfs were on stage in London's West End today, a Sunday, and it lifted the curtain on the whole issue of entertainment and trading on this, the day of rest. More from Michael Cole.
Sunday theatre looks like a hit. There was nearly a full house for this performance of Snow White and the 7 Dwarfs.
Look at it. I mean, it's terrific, isn't it? Absolutely fabulous. We're delighted. Over the moon.
For a Saturday, it's a day for the kids. Day for the kids. Nice day. I think you'd enjoy it, wouldn't you? Say hello.
The star of the show, Dana, gave Sunday performances last year at Hull, where they were equally popular, though it does make life hectic.
We got up about 11 and went to Mass and back home and had lunch, and then I packed because I'm flying out tonight to do a television tomorrow. Kissed the children goodbye and ran down here as fast as I could.
The Actors Union Equity gave specific approval for this and one other show, but there's no overall agreement on Sunday opening in the West End's 45 theatres. That would need a referendum of Equity's members. Under this deal, Snow White and her friends get more pay and Monday off, an arrangement approved of even by Lazy.
And that's all from the newsroom for this weekend. Good night.
Good evening to you. The weather's up to its old tricks again, and this rather innocuous-looking area of low pressure is going to deepen like mad as it heads towards the north of the country, bringing yet another very swell, and of course a fair bit of rain into the bargain. Tonight, it's a pretty wintry picture, as you may well have just seen on the news. A number of showers still scattered around, but I think most of those will tend to die to leave much of the country with a fine and very frosty night, but I think some snow showers will keep going in the north of Scotland. Later on in Northern Ireland, Wales and southwestern parts, the temperature will begin to rise, and before the end of the night, some cloud and outbreaks of rain will have spread in from the west, the rain perhaps for a short time preceded by snow. And then tomorrow, central and eastern parts starting off dry and in many places even reasonably bright, but that won't last long because over Northern Ireland, England, Wales and southern Scotland, the cloud and rain will spread up quite quickly from the southwest.